Hey guys, it's your girl, Coach Yana, and I just finished being interviewed. It's very rare that I get to be the person who's being interviewed rather than the person that's doing the interviewing, but it's always fun. What I wanted to come on here quickly and talk about is how sometimes guardians and parents will like beat themselves up because their children are soft. And like what I hear growing up, or not necessarily growing up, but from like older relatives that have children. It's like, well, when I was a child, my parents or guardians did X, Y, and Z, and I only did X. So I don't understand why my child is feeling a type of way. And what I like to say back is, well, number one, just because your parents did X, Y, and Z, it doesn't mean that you doing X is still acceptable and okay. And just because you didn't mean to hurt your child's feelings or to hurt them in one way or another, it doesn't mean that you didn't do it. That's the first thing. The second thing is you should take it as a badge of honor that you did such a good job at shielding your child from the level of trauma that you experienced that one, they are not taking even what you took growing up because they know that they're more valuable. Well, they know their worth. And two, they have set boundaries because when you're not used to a certain level of abuse or mistreatment, the amount of mistreatment that you will take is significantly less than someone whose whole life they've been mistreated by others. If you're always used to being the butt of the joke, if you're used to being disrespected, then you will take much, much more than someone who's not used to that because to you, that's just normal. That's how people treat you. That's how you've been treated your whole life. So I think it's very, very important that we recognize okay, well, if your child is able to set boundaries and if your child is able to recognize where you're falling short, it means that you've probably done a better job at recognizing their feelings, making them feel seen, safe, and heard than perhaps your parents or guardians, grandparents, uncles, aunts, whoever did for you. And so they're better able to set boundaries and say, hey, I don't like when you did X, Y, and Z, and it hurt my feelings. The next thing is just because, and I said this already, but just because you didn't mean to hurt your child's feelings, it doesn't mean that you didn't do it. And just because you did do it, it doesn't make you a bad person. Everybody makes mistakes. There's no perfect anything out here. That's why I'm here, Coach Yana, children's confidence coach, to help fill in those gaps because it does take a village to raise a child. And to say anything else is just wrong and it's not true. It does take having people in your corner that you know are on your children's side and know are have your best interests at heart as well to help you raise your child because children are challenging. And sometimes you can get overwhelmed as a parent or guardian or grandparent or whoever with all the other things that you have going on in life. So you can take your anger out on your child or over pour on your child things that they don't have any business knowing about. So what I would say is that at the end of the day, like you have to be able to recognize that, hey, your child might have been hurt by what you said. Your child might feel a type of way about what you said. And that doesn't make you a horrible person. It doesn't make you a bad person, but it does maybe mean that you have some growth and development to do. And so don't beat yourself up about the mistake you made. Apologize to your child and work to do better, period. That's all you can do. And there's like a whole nother philosophy of like old school parenting where it's like, well, I'm not apologizing to a child. Why? Why are you so much better than a child that you can apologize when you're wrong? To me, that's just not a smart way of being. If you recognize that what you did wasn't right, you should apologize, regardless of if that child is 7, 10, or if that person is 100. If you wouldn't like what you did to someone else, why would you do it to your child? People have higher standards for their children than anybody else. You don't want your child to back talk, but you back talk. You don't want your child to do certain things, but you do them. You want your child to recognize when they're wrong and take ownership and accountability, but you don't. You don't take ownership and accountability because you think you're too good to apologize to your child. And that's not right. Regardless of how you want to put it, it's not right. And just because your guardians were horrible to you and you're just bad to your child, it doesn't mean anything. And then sometimes people will say, oh, well, I don't understand why my child stopped talking to me because when my parent or guardian did X, Y, Z, A, like all these crazy, crazy things to me, I still kept talking to them. It's because you were raised to believe and think that you were deserving of the mistreatment that you got. You were raised to believe that that's all you deserved, but that's not how children are raised now. We have social media, we have access to different tools, we have virtual life. So children aren't as lonely, grown-ups aren't as lonely now because you can literally have a full community of people you've never met physically, but have emotional and connection ties to. Heck, you could be emotionally connected to your AI. There are people who are in full-blown relationships with their chat GPT, So it's a different world. And if you were conscious and aware enough not to let your child deal with the same things that you dealt with, then you have to understand that they're not going to accept the same things that you accepted. They're going to see the world differently. And that's a good thing. It's because you didn't allow them to be hurt in the same horrible, horrendous ways you were. So it's not a bad thing that your children set boundaries. It's not a bad thing that your children can recognize when you've done them wrong. And in fact, it's a good thing because you don't want to raise a doormat, a child who feels like, oh, I deserve to be mistreated. That's the best I can get. That's not right. So, you have to keep in mind that if you did a good job, your children are going to take less than you took. And thank goodness. And then there's those parents or guardians or grandparents or whoever that will say, oh, well, I went through this and I was okay. I always say, like, if you had an adult who was in your life that could have protected you from some of those things that you went through, how would you have felt then? If you had an adult that would have seen your point of view back then when you were going through whatever you went through, how many traumas and self created pain would you have avoided if you had an adult that helped you feel seen, safe, and heard? So instead of using that as an excuse of, oh, I had this and I turned out just fine, how about you sit and think about how many times you cried, how many times you wished that things were different? And how about you create that for someone else? I tell my children, I've told this to myself growing up as a child and all different things, be for someone else who you wish you had. Because it's easy to say, oh, well, I was this and that, and it's so easy to to redo those patterns, those cycles, those generational traumas because they're subconsciously programmed. That's the easy thing to do. That's a cop out, and that's an excuse. But the brave, courageous thing to do is to recognize that you're not perfect and it's okay. It takes a strong person to recognize that you are going to hurt people's feelings, even the people you love the most. And it takes a really strong, emotionally intelligent person to not only recognize when they've hurt their child, but to acknowledge it, apologize, and do better. But you using your lame excuse of, oh, well, this happened to me and I turned out just fine is a proof that you're bitter and likely also you're someone who you take criticism harshly, and you've probably been trained like I was, honestly, that if you hurt someone's feelings it makes you a bad person, or if you mess up it's taking away your value. Like if you do something wrong, then you're bad for doing that. No, if you do something wrong, you're human, because that's what humans do. You messed up, you made a mistake. There was this man that I worked with. His name was Marty. Shout out to him. He's a great guy. He told me pens have whiteout, computers have backspaces, and all the different devices have backspace. Pencils have erasers because everything makes mistakes. Even typewriters had whiteout, or whatever. I don't know anything about typewriters, so that could have been wrong. But anyway, all the things have ways to go back because as an adult, as a parent, as a guardian, you're going to make mistakes. It's a part of life. But having the capacity to recognize that you're not a horrible person, number one, for making a mistake is a win. Number two, recognizing and having the capacity to realize that just because you did something wrong or whatever, it doesn't mean that you're horrible. But it doesn't also mean that doesn't happen. So I think it's important to apologize to children, apologize in general, and do better. And then don't go down the victim world of apologizing over and over and over and over and over again until your child has to say it's okay and apologize for you apologizing. And then don't say, well, I apologize that you feel this way, or I apologize that you felt this and this and that. Just apologize for what you did, period. And recognize it doesn't make you a horrible person because you messed up. You might be going through some horrible stuff in your own life. You might have been a product of, who knows, DV or SA or anything like that. So it doesn't make it right what you did, though. Just because you didn't punch your child in the face and you hit them on the back of the head, it doesn't mean you didn't still put the paws on them. Period. So just because what you did is a lesser version of what was done to you, it doesn't make it right. It does make it better, but it does mean that there are still ways you can develop. And acknowledging the fact that you can still develop is not a bad thing. And once again, apologizing to children is not a bad thing. It's actually a sign of strength. If you feel like you're holier than thou, you don't have to apologize for your mistakes just because it's a child. To me, that makes you a bad person. I'm just being honest. That makes you bad. If you feel like you can't own up to what you've done. And like I said, it takes a lot of strength. It takes a lot of courage to recognize that maybe you didn't do the right thing. It takes a lot of emotional intelligence to own up to the fact that perhaps you did hurt your child's feelings or you did do something wrong, period. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. At the end of the day, just apologize to children, admit when you're wrong. And also the last thing I'll say, because I gotta go, is be the example you want for your child. So if you are not exhibiting the behaviors that you say that you want your child to exhibit, then to me, you have no right to set that standard for them. You should, at a bare minimum, be meeting every single standard that you say your child has to set or has to meet. At a bare minimum, you should be meeting every single one of those standards before you poke your head up high, holier than thou, and come at your child. Because if you are not exhibiting even all or half the behaviors that you're trying to hold your child to a higher standard than you even meet, you're backwards. And at some point, you're just a bully. That's just what it is. You're a bully. And likely, you're too weak to stand up to the people who are bullying you. So instead, you decide to bully your child. And what does that make you? A bully. That's it. That's Coach Yana. I'll see you next time. Bye.